Okay, it's been a while since we've done one of these. It's gonna be my April wrap up. I'm gonna be talking about the 16 books that I read in April. I'm sorry, this is a couple days late. The weather's been weird, so I haven't had good lighting, and also I haven't really had time to film. I have been working 2 jobs. I only have 1 day off a week, and it's Sunday, so I'm using it to film this video. This month was kind of a weird reading month for me. I just felt like, even though I read 16 books, I had like 1 5-star. I felt like I was reading books that just because like my library hold was running out, and like they were all books that I like set out to want to read, but I didn't necessarily want to read them when I was reading them, if that makes sense. Like, the reason I put a library hold on them was because I wanted to read them, but feeling forced to read them and finish them by the time that my like loan was up was a struggle this month. So I felt like I didn't get to really read any of the books that I have like physically. I really hope that the dishwasher is not making too much noise. But yeah, let's get into it. The first book that I finished this month was The Midnight Library. This book is about a girl who commits suicide, and she, like, in between like death, like life and death, she like wakes up in the Midnight Library, and she gets to like go back and experience all of her like all of the different lives she could have had if she had made different choices, like working through like regrets that she had. It could have been good, but I didn't like it at all. I gave it 2 stars. I just wasn't, like, I didn't really care about the character, like the main character, and the like descriptions of like sci-fi and stuff, like it was just kind of like light sci-fi, and like I didn't care. So yeah, I didn't really enjoy that book. It also felt like it was trying too hard to be super deep, and that's just like really not my thing. The next book that I finished this month was Concrete Rose. This book was so good, actually. Angie Thomas wrote The Hate U Give, and this book follows Maverick Carter, who is the main character's father from The Hate U Give. And it's him in his teen years, so when he like finds out that he's a dad, and he's like a senior in high school, and he's like trying to figure out his life, and he's like kind of like in a gang, but he like he's making choices that maybe he doesn't want to be in a gang anymore. Yeah, it was so good, and like Angie Thomas is just incredible storyteller. Like, the way that she writes is so phenomenal, and I felt so honored to read this story. Like, I'm so glad that she decided to tell it. And I gave it 5 stars. I don't know if I already said that or if it was obvious. The next book that I read was A Promised Land, Barack Obama's book. I listened to this one on audio, and I don't rate nonfiction, but this one, honestly, did not enjoy it as much as I like wanted to. Some of it was cool, like getting to hear him talk about things that like were happening when I was in middle and high school, like mostly middle school, and I was like slightly too young to like really understand what was going on. Was cool, like getting to relive that, but mostly this book just made me want to start rewatching The West Wing. The next book that I finished was The Well of Ascension. This is the 2nd book in the Mistborn trilogy, and it like starts like a year after the end of the 1st book, and it follows like Vin and her pals and they are like trying, like there's armies like outside of there, outside of the city, and they're like trying to win back, like the armies are trying to win back the kingdom, but then they are like realizing how to like stop them, and there's like some other stuff happening, and like this is a solid fantasy. I gave it 3 stars. My like biggest complaint about the first one was that Vin seemed to like completely change who she was and the way that she acted because of a boy, and I wasn't a big fan of that, but that actually seemed to like be on the back burner in this book, so that was good. Yeah, it was just a solid fantasy. I'll read the next one probably. The next book that I finished was Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, which is the 4th book in the Bridgerton series. I read the first 3 like back to back in February, I think. And this one follows Colin and Penelope, and it also, you find out who Mrs. Bridgerton is, which if you watched the TV show, then you already know. But I had like really high hopes for this one because I loved Colin and the first 3 books, and Penelope is like super cool. But reading from Colin's perspective and seeing how he interacted with Penelope made him like, he's kind of a jerk, okay? I don't know how else to say it. Like, he's just an asshole. And I didn't enjoy that part of it. Like, the way that he, like, it was still like a really fun and enjoyable read, but I had like high hopes for this man, like gave it 3 stars. The next book that I finished was Girl, Woman, Other. This is a collection of short stories that like follows various Black, British women and non-binary people, and like how they interact with the world around them, and like the effects of racism on them, and it's like super like intragenerational, I guess. I think that's the right word. But like it follows, like there's a mom and there's a daughter, and then you see a grandmother, and then like all their lives like interconnect. They're like friends or whatever. And the reason I read this is because Emma from Drinking on My Shelf always talks about it, and it was like a favorite book of 2020, so I was like, I'm gonna pick that up. And the format just didn't really work for me. Like, I did enjoy the story, but it wasn't like something that I thought was phenomenal. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I just didn't really have time to connect with any of the characters, and so that made it hard to like super immerse myself in the world. And it was also one of the books that I was reading when I would have probably rather been reading like something else, like something more fun. But the next 2 books that I read or that I finished are In the Middle of Somewhere and Out of Nowhere. These books, they're like gay romances. I don't know if there's like a better, more good way to say that. MLM, but when I say that, I think of multi-level marketing schemes. But anyways, about books. And they follow, the first one, In the Middle of Somewhere, follows, I forgot their names. But this professor who is like super tatted, and he's from Philly, and he like goes somewhere to interview like in the middle of a tiny town, and to be a professor, like to get his job. And like after the interview, he goes, like he hits a dog with his car, and then he meets this like really cool guy. His name is Rex, I remember that. And I think the main character's name is Daniel. And he like was like really drawn to him. Then he goes back to Philly, and then he runs into Rex a bunch of times when he comes back to his job, and then they like fall in love or whatever. And it was really good. Like, I ended up giving it, the first one, 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. And then the next one follows Daniel's brother, Colin, I think is his name. And growing up, Colin had been like kind of really mean to Daniel, like super homophobic to him. But you realize in this book that he's gay, and like Daniel kind of realizes that in the first book, like spoilers, but and this is his his story with this guy named Rafe that he meets, and Rafe is like he's an ex-con, and he works with gay youth or queer LGBTQ plus youth. There we go. And they like spend a bunch of time together, and they like fall in love, but there's like a bunch of drama. I gave that one 3 stars. I think the best, like most unique thing about this is a lot of times I read romance and it's like 2 perspectives, but these are both like one perspective. Like the first one is Daniel's and the other one is Colin's, and it's just like their perspective and how they are like interacting with other people, which I thought was like an interesting way to read romance. The next book that I finished was The Three Mothers. This is a nonfiction about Martin Luther King, James Baldwin, and Malcolm X's moms, and like just like their biography, like the mothers, like where they were born and how they grew up, and like how that impacted the way that they raised their children. And it was really good and like super informative. I really liked the way that the author like wrote the book, and like how I learned while reading it, if that makes sense. Yeah. The next book that I finished was Dune Messiah, which I listened to on audio because I listened to the first one on audiobook. And even when I listened to that one, I was like, I don't know if this is the best way to consume this. But I was like, honestly kind of missing the narrator. Like I liked like listening to his voice and like whatever. And so I was like, okay, I'll listen to this one on audio. I like don't remember anything that happened in this. Like I kind of do, and there's like a bunch of like political intrigue and like betrayal plots and whatever, but it was like kind of hard to follow, and I also didn't care. So I did end up giving that one 2 stars, and I probably will not be continuing on that series, but you know, I gave it a try. The next book that I read is a graphic novel. It's called Check Please. It's the first, like this, it started as a webcomic, and it's published, like the author self-pubbed, but the version that I read was like by a publisher, and it follows Biddy, who's like a vlogger who's also on a hockey team, and it's his first 2 years of college, and he like bakes all the time. He's so cute, and it's kind of a romance. Like there is romance by the end of the 2nd year, and I really, really liked this. I gave it 4 stars. It was so cute and like fun to read. Yeah, I'm excited to pick up more graphic novels in the future. The next book that I read is Small Change, and it's by the same author that wrote In the Middle of Somewhere and the other one. And it follows Daniel's like best friend, and she's like falling in love with the guy. She's a tattoo artist, and he owns like a sandwich shop / coffee shop thing. And they like do be falling in love. I gave it 3 stars. It was like fun, but it was like nothing special. Oh, okay. The next book that I read, the first physical book that I read this month because it wasn't from the library, was Take a Hint, Dani Brown. This book is the 2nd book in the Brown sisters like trilogy. I read the first one last year, I think. I don't know which side I should be holding the books on, so hope this is okay. But it follows Dani, and she is a grad student. She's like trying to get her PhD, and so she like teaches some. And Zaf, who works he's like as security in the building, and he's like an ex-rugby player, and he's like super in love with Dani. And then she like gets trapped in an elevator, and he carries her out, and the internet thinks they're dating, and they decide to like fake date for publicity for Zaf's charity that he runs. and it works, but the rest of the book is just like them actually falling in love, and like it's fake dating goodness, and Zaf is so, like, he's such a great love interest, and I loved him. And Danny is like super fun, and she has like a bunch of like, I don't know, like things she has to overcome to like believe that she would be good in a relationship and that she should be in a relationship, which is really fun to read about. So yeah, I gave this 4 stars. I really liked it. I love the way that Talia Hibbert writes her romances, and I love that the characters are like super like developed, and it's not just like a love story, but it's also like story about the individual characters. The next book that I read is In the Dream House, and this is a memoir about the author being in an abusive relationship, and she talks a lot about queer like domestic abuse and domestic violence, and it's kind of written like kind of like a horror, but also kind of like she references a lot of like tropes that happen in folk tales or whatever, and it was like devastatingly beautiful, and I also like learned a lot about queer domestic violence, and it was very good, and I'm glad I picked it up. And it was like super hard to read, but I think that like everyone should read it. The next book that I finished was At Your Age, Eve Brown, which is the 3rd book in the Brown sister trilogies, and I think this might be my favorite. I loved Chloe, I loved Danny, but this, I don't know. So what happens, the like premise of this one is Eve like has been jumping from career to career, and she's like always quitting them and stuff, and her parents are like, we can't keep supporting you, you have 3 months to find a job and find a place to live. And she freaks out, and then she drives, and she like stumbles into an interview at a bed and breakfast where she could be the cook, and she meets Jacob, and I love Jacob. He's so precious. I just don't ever want them to be sad, okay? But Jacob is autistic, and so he has like trouble connecting with people, and he like, it's kind of like a hate to love thing. Like, he is not a fan of Eve, but she like hits him with his car, and so she's like stays to help, and there's like, I don't know, it's so cute. It's such a fun romance, but it's like also like they're finding things out about themselves, and they like, I don't know, it was so cute. I gave it 5 stars. I loved it so much, and I can't wait to see what Talia Hibbert does next, because I will be picking it up. All right, now the last book that I read this month was Shadow and Bone, because there's a new Netflix series and I really want to watch it, but I will not watch it before I have read all 3 of the Grisha books and then the Six of Crows duology, because they like happen in the show. So I read it, and I really, really liked it. Like, I'm kind of mad that it took me so, like, I don't know why I didn't read it when it was first published. But this is like a YA fantasy, and it follows like there's like a magic system and a war and stuff. It's super fast paced. There's like kind of a love triangle, whatever. Yeah, I really liked it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. That's the last book that I read this month. And I'm really excited to like not have as many library books to have to read this month, because it was just like very stressful, and I ended up not loving a lot of what I was reading. But yeah, all right, that's it. Goodbye. Hope you have a good day. Oh, fuck, lighting.